peak.
The latest data show another rise in COVID.
Hello and welcome to In the News Right Now. I'm Leilani Dowding.
And I'm Gareth Ike. In the News Right Now is a brand new Ickonic panel show. We take the stories of the week and we put them to our ever-changing panel of guests.
On the show this week, we're joined from Mumbai by journalist and activist Yohan Tengra, journalist Jacqui Deevoy and political commentator June Slater.
So before we start the discussion, let's take a look at the big stories from the last 7 days. The biggest story, of course, being the death of Queen Elizabeth II and the accession of King Charles III.
Electric cars are to become mandatory in California by 2035. Within 2 weeks of announcing this, California asked owners not to charge them as temperatures were expected to hit triple digits for millions of residents, putting a strain on the power grid.
That went well then. New UK Prime Minister boasts of having the most diverse cabinet in history, but without a single white male in a top cabinet position.
And a teacher who refused to use a student's gender-neutral pronouns condemns insanity as he is jailed in Ireland.
A transgender activist has poured bottles of urine over themselves outside the human rights offices. Where to begin? Yohan, I'll start with you. So what's the reaction been like in India to the passing of the Queen?
I mean, if you look at general Indian society, there's definitely a tendency for worship of the Queen because, I mean, just analyzing how people have responded to the pandemic out here as well, people don't typically tend to think for themselves. And whatever comes down through authority is generally accepted. So because our Prime Minister came out and actually announced that there would be a day of remembrance for the Queen after she passed away, and we would even be lowering the flag, wherever the flag were being raised in the country. So this is not the kind of attitude that we should expect from a country that is part of the Commonwealth, that has been enslaved by the East India Company and the British Empire for a very long time. There are pockets of people out here who actually, I mean, it includes us and our group as well, along with a couple of other people who've been talking about how India has never really been free ever since we got so-called independence. The British still, have a lot of influence in the country, specifically the Queen and now the King, because we filed a bunch of RTI requests out here, some of our activists have, and we've asked them questions such as, does the Queen actually need a visa to come into India? And does our Prime Minister need a visa to go to Britain or to anywhere else? And the response typically that we got from the government is that no, the Queen doesn't need a visa or any kind of permission to come into India. She can come in whenever she likes, but our head of state, in order to go to Britain or anywhere else, we do need, he does need permission of that other state. So that way, I mean, if you see, there are a lot of evidence that we have, even going back to the time of the 1950s, where, there was an official letter by the government which stated that even after India was declared a republic, we still count as British subjects as far as British law is concerned. So definitely people who are aware about these facts in the alt media out here, in the resistance movement, we've all been, very disgusted with how the government has been responding to the Queen's death. In India, it's typically not the culture, even in our religious kind of ethos, when it comes to the Mahabharata and all. When we burn or when we remember the devil character Ravan, we typically create a effigy of him or a statue and burn it down. We don't have a tendency in our country in general where we evict statues and really look up to the people who enslaved us in the past. And this is exactly what happens when it comes to the Queen and all the viceroys and people who enslaved us. So the general public sentiment is very, you can say, apologetic and very sad. But as far as the people who actually know and who care and who respect our freedom fighters and the people who were enslaved and starved off by the British, we are all very pissed off, to be honest.
See, I expected that. I expected people in India to be kind of a bit sort of not really bothered about it, given the history and the fact that they have been massively enslaved. And like you said there, Yohan, starved. I mean, a lot of people don't realise what went on in terms of Churchill. Churchill was seen as a massive hero, but obviously what he did to the people of India was don't bear think about.
Yeah, and I was quite surprised that I got a lot of messages from Canadian friends who have been, quite involved in the freedom movement, actually saying, oh, we're really sorry to hear about the Queen. And I was quite surprised by that, being Canada, but I think they seem to be more royalists than a lot of our population. And I think in England, we've been really split. So I know I have a similar opinion to June about the monarchy. If you want to explain what you think, June.
Well, I'm not a big royalist, and people from the north of England tend not to be because we're not as wrapped up in the pomp and circumstance. Southerners and people living in London get involved in all the pageantry, and I can understand that being of great importance, and it is something we do rather well. But as far as the Queen goes, I put a post up the other day, it was that long, fitting a screenshot, just saying that the Queen has passed. I won't be blogging about it because it's a divisive subject, and that she was a dutiful Queen. And I said that because I don't think it was a job she ever wanted. I think she was lumbered with it and she did it to the best of her ability. And the best of someone's ability as head of the British government and the British opposition parties is to keep your nose out. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be impartial. And to be impartial for 70 odd years is a bit of a challenge for anyone, but she did that. And because of that, she gave a certain continuity. And my parents, I'm 64, my parents always brought me up to believe that basically countries were more stable with a royal family. Whether they were right or wrong, they were working class people, I have no idea. We seem to be going down the pan anyway now. The Queen kept out of everything, but Prince Charles has been involved in everything, big time. I will never forget him doing a speech. I think it was at the WEF. I mean, it would be, wouldn't it? And he turned around and said, well, we can all do a bit. We can do a bit for the green agenda. We even buy sustainable trousers, £1,300 a pair. And I thought, how out of touch are you? You can go to Bury Market, buy 2 pairs of Levi for a tenner. And he's talking about sustainable trousers for 1,300 quid a pair. And net zero, well, the day he turns Highgrove into some allotments for the poor, I'll believe he believes in net zero. But while you have rolling landscape gardens over, I can't remember how many acres it is, 42 or something, then you are not necessarily that green. And the green agenda that he supports isn't green, because windmills with fiberglass sails that need antifreeze spraying on them to stop them from seizing up in cold weather, that's not green. And now we've got this man who's the King of England. Now, he says he's going to back away from all his charities and the things he's supported, which he hasn't got a choice in, by the way. And bearing in mind, this brand, this royal family, has got 1,000 years invested in this. So they're going to keep an eye. I'm sure there's plenty of people around him going to keep a sharp eye on him. But I think he's already invested in bringing William into it. I've seen William and Kate as they haven't done anything wrong. They're very pleasing on the eye. She certainly is. She's a very nice girl. And I think we're that desperate for somebody, when I say attractive, I mean physically and emotionally attractive in the royal family. We're glad of anything. And he's already making speeches about net zero and climate change. So is he just going to hand this mantle of interference onto his son, and he's going to step back and, on the surface, be neutral? People so committed to such agendas seldom step away. They just go quiet on the surface and get on with what they want to do anyway. So unfortunately, it's not the right time, apparently, because we're going to be in mourning, I don't think, for a long time. I think times have moved on. I can understand people connected to the royal family wanting to be in mourning, but most people just want to get up and go to work, pay some respects and get on with the day. And I'm sorry, but this country's faced far too much unnecessary, heavy-handed legislation this last 2.5 years for us to start sitting back and having this lapse of time while we all go into mourning. Because unfortunately, I did a video the other day about the 607,000 people who died in 2020, who were unceremoniously put in the ground like toxic waste, whatever they died from. And people with terminal illness having to say goodbye in a hospital car park to their loved one, never to be seen again because they weren't allowed in the hospital. And people saying goodbye over this. There you go, there's your dead relative. He's dying now, say goodbye. How callous is that? How stupid? And how has it now proven to be totally unnecessary to behave like that? So in this time of reflection, where we're given all this time to sit back and reflect, yes, the Queen has died. She's 96 or whatever, 93, whatever she was, I can't remember. She's had a good innings and she's had a very full life. And I am neutral on the passing of the Queen, but I am very, very wound up about the passing of 607,000 people, because I got messages from relatives of these people during lockdown. And during lockdown, these people had nowhere else to turn but a blogger. And they turned to me because their MPs were doing nothing, despite the fact they got extra pay to get them through, £7,000 a piece. So I think there's an awful lot wrong with British politics right now. And this time that we've got, I think we should all reflect on how we've been treated and never, ever let it happen again.
Absolutely.
End of sermon.
Absolutely. I must admit, like, I found it, like you mentioned, Leilani, about the kind of the sort of the division on the whole kind of the royal situation, particularly within the media. But what surprised me, and obviously June's touched on this in terms of the King Charles and the World Economic Forum connection, is that a lot of people that are, you know, anti-lockdown, anti-mandates of any kind, have been calling out the Great Reset, they've been calling out the World Economic Forum for the best part of 18 months to 2 years, that are now saying, God save the King. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, but you know he's up to his neck in the World Economic Forum. He's been working with Klaus Schwab since at least 1992, that we have photo evidence of. So I found that strange. And another thing, actually, I was going to ask your opinion on this, Jacqui, in terms of having worked within media for some time. I received a message probably about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, it might have even been earlier than that, from a friend of mine who was saying, the Queen's dead, they're connected to someone at the BBC, they said, the Queen's dead, it's done. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, so they're preparing a statement or whatever, so I was like, fair enough. So then I was kind of looking at some of the media that was coming out, and I know someone within the BBC had said she was dead and then backpedaled and apologised, and actually she's not dead. And then I saw someone outside Balmoral working for the BBC who went, no, we've just had word, she's comfortable, we spoke to the doctor, she's comfortable. And I'm sat there, I'm thinking, well, I know she's been dead for at least 2 hours. And so it kind of threw out to me the idea that people say, well, the media wouldn't lie, and the mainstream media wouldn't manipulate, and they wouldn't hold back truth. And it's like, well, there's a prime example of it. How does a Wally like me in Derbyshire know that the Queen's dead and I'm not connected to the royal family? So Jacqui, my question would be, is that something that's kind of quite normal within the mainstream media, that actually when it comes to the royal family, there's you don't report on this until we tell you do?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of smacked of 9/11 World Trade Center Building 7 all over again, when Jane Stanley reported the Building 7 falling 20 minutes before it was actually brought down in an obvious controlled demolition. Yeah, of course, the news agencies get the news pretty much as soon as it happens, and then they're told to hold fire, I think, until they're given the go-ahead. Yeah, so it kind of reminded me of that. With regards to the Queen herself and her passing, I've never been a big fan of the royal family. I've never been a fan at all, in fact. Brought up in an Irish family, probably had something to do with that. My mum and dad weren't fans either. We didn't really pay them much attention. We thought they were a bit of a waste of space. Call that disrespectful, if you will, but I'm not a fan of the Queen in particular. I mean, look at what she's done. You know, in the middle of this so-called pandemic where people were dying and suffering and poverty-stricken, she's throwing this great big Jubilee celebration costing millions and millions of pounds of the taxpayers' money. Throughout the whole pandemic, she's had the ability to step in and say something. I know she's not allowed to be political, but she did get political a few months ago when she appeared telling everyone to take their jabs and stop being so selfish. You know, that's not a very good, by my standards anyway, not a very good thing to do. And I just think the whole funeral, again, more millions of pounds spent for no reason as far as I can see. It looks like a big psyop of mass hysteria and weeping and wailing and gnashing of the teeth, whipping people up into an absolute frenzy, you know, to the point where they almost feel that she was their grandmother or something, you know. And you get a lot of people trying to defend her, saying, oh, she was a mother, she was a grandmother, she was a sister. Yeah, well, look what she did to her sister. And also, she was a big mate of Jimmy Savile, you know, the whole family were. What the hell was that about? No one gets close to the royal family unless they've been supremely vetted. and had he been vetted, they would have known what he was. They did know what he was. The only reason they were friends with him was because he was providing some kind of service to them. That's as clear as day. So, yeah, for all those reasons, I'm not a big fan. And I hate the sort of flouting of the rules and the flagrant display of wealth and the wasting of money and the horrible people that she was in contact with, including Epstein and Maxwell, who were invited to Balmoral, apparently, on several occasions. Yeah, I just think it's horrible. And as for Charles becoming king, well, I just read this morning, someone posted on Facebook that's trending on Twitter, hashtag not our king. So that's interesting. I did try and find it on Twitter, but it's hard for me because I've got a permanent ban there. So.
No, that was trending. It's interesting actually because I mentioned that the connection to Savile, because I think, we're told, judge people by the company they keep. Yeah. And my attitude was exactly the same as you, Jacqui, in that I said that no one gets near the royal family without British intelligence knowing every single thing about them. And you've got an infamous child sex abuser. They're saying upwards of 500 children were abused by Jimmy Savile. Also a necrophiliac, which is, I can't even get my head around that.
Do you know what's funny? I actually heard about that around 2003. I was working, it was like a footballer's wives stupid documentary. And the PR lady also did PR for the Met Police. And she actually told me, and my ex at the time, Mark Williams, that Jimmy Savile messed around with dead bodies. And I was blown away. And in a way, it was like, I almost couldn't believe it. But I'm like, but these people know. But then I'd read your dad's books and everything. So I was just like, wow, people know this. It's known. Like, why is nothing happening? Exactly. But clear as day, I remember her saying, and like, I think I told my parents, and they're like, whatever. Yeah, don't be stupid. Yeah. You're ridiculed. You get ridiculed. So it's, when it did come out, I was like, told you.
Yeah. And so, if that police officer knows, the royal family would have known. And when I said that, someone replied going, well, you say that, but actually a reporter for The Sun got a job undercover, got a job working at Buckingham Palace. And I was like, well, but was the Sun reporter a serial child abuser and necrophiliac? Because if the answer's no, then it's not really comparable with Jimmy Savile, is it? It's bizarre. But moving on then, electric cars, this is funny.
Yeah, so California has banned the sale of gasoline and diesel cars. They're going to stop that 2035, and I live there, and I know how hot it gets in the summer and how everyone needs to crank up their air conditioning. So that's what's happened 2 weeks after the announcement. Everyone's got their AC on full blast. There's not enough energy in the grid. I was used to blackouts all the time just from too much energy being used. So they've asked people not to charge their electric cars. So Jacqui, what do you think of that?
Well, on a very personal level, there's been some electric buses and cars around where I live recently, and obviously they're very quiet, which is kind of nice on the one hand, but as someone with really bad eyesight, I kind of rely a lot on the sounds. The number of times I've nearly been run over by an electric vehicle now is kind of getting a bit worrying. So so that's just on a personal level. I think it sounds like California is being used as a sort of testing bed for it. Is that right? So I think, and 2035 is when they're hoping to...
they're hoping to phase them out by then. But California is a very kind of, if you like to say, woke, follow the trends kind of state where they like to, if it's net zero or the Green New Deal in America, as they call it, they will be the first to try and implement it.
Yeah. Okay, on a sinister level, I think that if everyone's cars are electric, when it comes to the point where they turn off the internet and they turn off the electric, then nobody will be able to travel anywhere, which is ultimately what they want. They want us all in our place, not flying anywhere, and they're working on that obviously already. But when it comes to they don't want people to own cars, so if they get everyone who has a car, which will probably just be rich people, to own an electric car, when they decide the moment's right to stop moving about on anything but foot and bicycle permanently, then they can just flick a switch and no one can charge their cars, and that'll be the end of that. So that's my kind of conspiracy, sinister take on it.
I think you're probably right. I'm the same. It's interesting with electric cars though, because I've got a friendship group, and we're all on WhatsApp, but we all live all over the country now. And so you just keep in touch. And so people were putting in their energy bills. And a friend of mine put in his energy bill and it was insane. It was like 12 grand a year, but he just lives in like a 3-bedroom house with his wife and 2 kids. I was like, what the? And then I remembered he's got an electric car. So it was obviously charging the car at the house. So that takes those bills to like astronomical levels, and people don't factor that in when they're getting electric cars. Yohan, is this whole kind of sort of electric car, Green New Deal, Agenda 2030 kind of deal, is that happening in India as well? Because in America it's obviously happening, as mentioned, but it's also happening here in the UK.
Okay, so let me give you some context first. Firstly, I've been following a lot of the protests that have been going on in Europe of late regarding people coming on the streets, burning their energy bills, the cost of living crisis and all of that. We're not seeing that in India as of now. I mean, inflation is rising and we're seeing the trends going towards food shortages, and there are developments happening regarding that. But the only reason I feel like we're not at the place where Europe and America is right now is because we're still continuing to import oil from Russia, that being one of the main reasons. As far as the other questions, the question you asked me about sustainability and the whole push towards decarbonization and 2030 and all of that, that is definitely happening. I'll just read you a couple of headlines that I've collected, regarding this, which does kind of prove that this is happening. There's one: India's warehousing sector at cusp of transformation. Government, business, and policymakers must pave the way for green economy. Then a majority of top 100 Indian companies report on their carbon reduction targets. Then towards the carbon neutral India, how central, state governments and corporations are striving to tackle the planetary crisis. Then specifically regarding electric vehicles, here's how EVs will play a big part in India's mission to go carbon neutral by 2070. Then there's many like this. India Inc. sees decarbonizing as primary sustainability goal. India Inc. being all the kind of billionaires in India who run the majority of major corporations in India. All of these people are setting carbon targets. They're not just focusing on going carbon neutral in terms of reducing emissions and stuff, but they also want to make more systemic changes with respect to actually decarbonizing that way. So there are all of these trends that have been going on, and India has signed up to the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, and with that we have all the SDGs being implemented on a state level. So we've seen major divestments from coal. We've started making these trends towards moving from coal. We've been making major investments in solar and all of these other so-called renewable sources. So these trends are definitely happening out here, as it's clear to see.
So this is what drives me crazy about this whole net zero carbon obsession and these net zero fanatics, is that they're talking about it to save the planet, but really carbon and carbon dioxide is like the life force of the planet.
Yeah.
Plants need it. And no one's talking about pollution like microplastics, plastics, the chemicals in the air and the water that affect your hormones, endocrine disruptors, cancer-causing chemicals. And you touched on that, June, when you said about the wind turbines and how they have to spray antifreeze on them. So do you want to elaborate a little bit more about, the real cost of this so-called green energy?
Well, it's obviously stupid. There's no other word for it, because every single thing they're advocating to cope with climate change, which I call the weather, has got several drawbacks. You've got the fiberglass makeup of the wind sails that have to go into landfill. And then you've got the ones that are out at sea with these big wind farms that need to send boats out, which are run on diesel, to maintain them, and to helicopters to spray them with antifreeze in bad weather. And it's killing fishing because they don't want the fishing boats to go out. And a lot of people that used to be in the trawler business have gone into wind farms. It's crippling everything. It's everything they say under the label sustainable is not sustainable. You've only got to look at, as you know, with social media. I've seen 22 videos now, separate videos of motorised scooters spontaneously combusting in the house, being charged. I've seen videos of buses catching on fire, white vans catching fire because they're electric, and they've not sorted it out yet. It's as simple as that. But it's like, come on, don't talk about that. Just talk about how green it is. Well, it's not very... I wouldn't buy an electric car because I wouldn't feel safe. I've got a relative who's got one, and she said, "What's up with you, June? It's safe." And then she opened her boot and she got 2 fire extinguishers, extra ones in her boot. No, of course it's safe. That's right. Take your luggage out and put a fire extinguisher in. We all need one of them. So that even the people who believe in them don't believe in them. So I just hope California gets some extra fire engines built, because I think there's definitely going to be job creation in the fire service for the future if we go down this route. And the trouble is, with this green agenda, yet again, social media won't let you talk about it. I have to refer to it as climate claptrap. If I put the phrase climate change together, Facebook put a warning on advising people to go to like a proper page where you can get real information. And then if you try and share anything from my UK Politics Uncovered page, as you go to share, it pops a little warning up saying, this page has shared false information in the past. Now, people don't see it as but it says previously. I think the word they use is previously. So immediately that puts you off sharing. You think, oh, false information. I don't want to be in trouble with Facebook. I don't want to lose my page. So to give you an instance of how powerful it is and how difficult it is to get the reality of the COVID situation or the green agenda, how difficult it is to put the information out, from December last year up until May this year, I was reaching 10 million people. My record was 10.9. And Facebook put a restriction on my account with the pop-up warning and told me I was going at the bottom of people's news feeds. Now, my great failure to meet community standards was putting a quote up by Russell Brand that he'd put on his own page that was still on. Basically, nothing to do with anything, just saying that people are feeling like they're going mental because of the way we've been treated. And apparently that was false information. And then the other one was a newspaper article with a peer-reviewed study on masks not working. I shared that. I didn't even introduce it. I just put the link up. And that's got me on a second 90-day ban. So that means for 180 days, that's 6 months. If you want to access UK politics, people wait for it to come in the news feeds. But I'm not coming in the news feeds because I'm right at the bottom. And then they send me messages saying, have you stopped blogging? I think, oh, God. So you can't even get the information out on a secondary platform like social media, which is one of the reasons I've pushed GB News so much, because at least they do address these things. And there's lots of talk of, people get conspiracy theories mixed up with the truth and one thing and another. But what we've got to do, we've got to create an environment where people who don't think there's anything wrong decide to investigate, because that's all I did. I didn't think there was anything wrong back in 2015. Until I was attacked at the Channel Tunnel by migrants. Then I knew there was something wrong. And then it happened again and again. And then I knew there was something really, really wrong. So I looked into why someone couldn't go to their second home with 4 little dogs in the car safely. What was happening? So I investigated. We need to get people in that frame of mind. And the only way you can do it is through the mainstream media, because people watching this already know there's something wrong. People following me already know there's something wrong, and there's not enough of us. So to get more, we have to poach them off the telly. If someone's spent decades relying on the BBC and ITV, etc., for their news, to get them to make the jump to me or to you, Gareth, is too wide a breach to cross. So the best way to do is to get them onto GB News, because at least they're allowed to discuss the topics on especially later night shows. That might not suit everyone, and I get called a shill for recommending them. I'm not a shill, I'm sensible, and I've worked in marketing. And what you need is the biggest audience possible. And the biggest audience is to get people who rely on the telly to go to another telly channel, and then ease them into social media, which can easily be done.
June, Jacqui made a really good point as well. So for example, she mentioned that there was a sinister agenda being at play here with electric cars, which I actually completely and utterly agree with. We saw it with lockdowns and COVID. You can't drive more than 5 miles or out of your county or out of your zone of wherever it is. So with an electric car, they could make that happen. And there was an article about charging your cars, and to be able to charge an electric car, you're going to have, in the future, very soon, and people have also told me this, you're going to have it connected to the internet. So you could say that on a mainstream, it's on a mainstream platform, this article, and you could show people and say, why is it that now to charge my electric car, I have to be connected to the internet? Because that way, if you're connected to the internet, it could get turned off because somebody's watching you charge your car. Like, you know, if there's a, say, right, you're on a 10-mile limit, someone can make sure you don't have more than 10 or 20 miles of energy put into your car. So, you know, that's a good point about the mainstream and using that to be able to say, look, this is my point, like what Jacqui said, there's a sinister agenda going on. Now look at this article that we all see and use that to kind of deduce what's going on here.
Yeah, to plant a seed, yeah. And that is definitely the idea. I mean, once it gets to driverless cars, which is the ultimate goal of that whole thing anyway, then you know I can tell the car where I want to go, and if it's somewhere they don't want me to go, then the computer says no, not tonight, mate.
I think we have to think about the entire electric vehicle situation with respect to the protest movements that have been going on against everything we've been resisting. Because like someone said, you need an internet to charge your car. So, you know, if it's very easy for them to just not let you charge your car and come for a protest, like the Canadian truckers, it would be very easy to censor them, you know, in that kind of world than it is today.
In terms of Liz Truss, though, another story on our list of stories this week is the fact that she's got the most diverse cabinet in history because it includes no white men. Now, for me, like everyone's equal, I don't have a real focus on what race or sexuality or anything anyone is. It's just like, you know, I'm Gareth, I don't identify as anything new. But the idea that you're selling something as being the most diverse because you're excluding a particular demographic just seems like a completely backwards way of looking at it. So Yohan, I'll put this to you, because obviously I keep mentioning the fact you're in India, obviously, because we're all in the UK. Do you have that same situation in India in terms of ticking a quota? Or is it a case of, well, no, Indian politicians are Indian and, you know, people on Indian TV are of Indian background? You don't have a kind of, well, we need that many white people, we need that many Asian people, you know. Do you have that there?
Just talking about Indian society, is if you see over the years, like over the last 2-3 centuries and even more, we've tended to be pretty, you can say, patriarchal. Like in general, there has been a lot of oppression that has gone on from males towards females, and there's been this general kind of putting down of women. So I did think that first wave feminism was very important for India to kind of at least get to the stage where women have equality of opportunity and not outcome, which is what I believe in the sense that everyone's different, men and women are different, and that in terms of opportunity, at least we should try to see if both of them can get the same thing, and then how they perform will dictate, you know, whatever their income or any other factor that we're talking about is. So with respect to this entire situation surrounding gender equality and you know, LGBTQ rights as well, it kind of reminds me about one of David's, you know, sort of statements that he made very early on when I used to read his books. He said that he would go to a country and he would just kind of type down all the elite agendas that entail the entire Great Reset, sustainable development thing. And every country he went to, like, there would be developments happening with that. So that's kind of a similar way in which even I pursue my research out here. I have an overall, you know, broader geopolitical global understanding of events and where the elite want to take us. And then I always see that there are developments happening out here to take us closer to that. So, I mean, a couple of months ago, or even maybe 1 or 2 years ago, India repealed Section 377. So that was the section that actually criminalized lesbians, gays, and kind of, you know, that kind of activity. And I mean, personally, if you ask me, it was an important step to at least not criminalize behavior, because I'm a libertarian. So I believe that, I mean, I basically believe in individual choice, and as long as you're not harming anyone, then that's your lookout. It's similar to what you said in the beginning. Like, I'm not even against gays or lesbians or anything like that. It doesn't really affect me. But of course, we have to look deeper and understand there are more sinister agendas behind why this entire push is happening globally, which mainly have to do with censoring speech as well as dividing society to some extent. And there are also some more sinister things that I would think it fits into, mainly to do with reducing the population. Because there are studies, I mean, there are open studies on this that people can go and look up, that educating women or like bringing them into employment actually reduces the number of kids they have. So, I mean, this is not me arguing against doing that, but it's just that we have to understand what is their vested interest in pushing these kind of things, because it does suit their agendas in many ways. I mean, India has a long history of eugenics, and the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation being involved in our family planning and actually making, real world attempts in terms of influencing children's education, in terms of influencing culture, the law, in order to bring down the total fertility rate. So they've successfully managed to do that. And I think that these other things also kind of fit into that. So there have been other developments with respect to this. I mean, there are certain states are coming out and calling for gender neutral uniforms in schools. So we are starting to see some of these developments happening from here in certain states, in certain schools. And there is an entire section of the left liberal kind of establishment in India as well, which is mainly financed by certain woke billionaires like Ratan Tata and Nandan Nilekani and people like that. I mean, you all might not be familiar, but we have our own set of kind of like mini George Soros type of people who are funding these kind of activities and leftist woke agendas in India. So we do have an entire ecosystem. We have our universities where this kind of propaganda is pushed out of. A lot of people who typically are against the government out here subscribe to all of these kind of beliefs like climate alarmism and LGBTQ, kind of the entire push for more transgender inclusion in society. So I definitely think that decriminalizing that was important. But now, even there are judges in the Supreme Court that are calling for it to be extended into all spheres of life, and that just decriminalization is not important. We have to change the culture, to be more inclusive. So I think that's where the issue lies. But I mean, if you just take all of this and think about it, we are definitely making moves to go towards where the entire world is heading in this regard.
And Yohan, do you think though within the Indian government, you would ever see a cabinet that has not one single Indian man in it, but only, they'll obviously still be Indian, but they were all white or they were all black, but no kind of, Indian politicians, that look kind of brown-skinned Indian politicians, that they were either just, white or black. Do you think you would ever see anything like that?
I would say that right now the government is mainly kind of occupied by BJP. So that's a typical right-leaning government, at least when it comes to cultural issues. So we are not likely to see anything like that happening, at least in this government. But maybe in the future, if Congress gets elected or there's another party called Aam Aadmi Party, so these parties are more like openly, in terms of being vocal, liberal, lefty, supporting woke agendas. I really wouldn't be surprised if in those governments we would see something like that. But as of now, no, that's not a development that's happening over here.
When I put this to all three females actually, because I'm thinking as a oppressive white male, I'm not in a position where I look at say an organisation or a company or a football team or whatever, and go, there's that many white men, they're like me, so I'm going to support that. But to put to the ladies, if you see a government cabinet or an organisation and there's more women in it, does that then make you actually go, I'm going to support that more? Or are you actually just not that bothered? It's just kind of almost like a virtue signal on their part?
I think I'd rather just see someone who can do the damn job. I think with this mixed cabinet is of Liz Truss, I think she's hit the jackpot, and I'll tell you why. Because if you look, I've just checked out the bio, Kwasi. All the main four positions are all Brexiteers, and three of them worked as Under-Secretaries of State for exiting the EU. Sadly, three of them voted for Theresa May's deal. So if that was brownie points, you've just lost 10 there. I think Suella Braverman should have been the Prime Minister because she's tenacious, very intelligent. She's not a particularly privileged background, and I've had personal dealings with her through Brexit where she just made sense, and she made sense in a way that the ordinary people could have understood. I see her as far superior to Liz Truss, so whatever shade she falls at on the colour chart is irrelevant, because to me, that person would have been better at the top job than Liz Truss. Liz, also with James Cleverly, is mixed race, so we've got, whilst it looks like it's box ticking for the Tories, and believe me, they're guilty of it, because David Cameron started it all, basically because there's an awful lot of Asians in the Labour Party and in council positions, the Tories were missing out. And I think he gave someone, I think he made her into she was in the House of Lords in like 6 weeks. It was something ridiculous a few years ago. He started it all. But I think as far as box ticking goes, I don't think she's needed to actually box it. Oh, yes, I'll take them because they're a little bit darker. I think she's managed to get two good people. I think James Cleverly is quite a decent bloke, actually. And I think Suella Braverman should have been the PM. And I think she would have been very astute. What people forget with government, and I'm not trying to teach people to suck eggs, but I mean, ordinary people who don't follow politics, is that the power behind the throne is the civil service, or as I like to call them, the snivel service. They are responsible for undoing many good things. A typical example was universal credit, devised by Ian Duncan Smith. Boy, oh boy, did that ruin his reputation. But who actually ruined his reputation? The civil service took a good idea and buggered it up. And they buggered it up because it should have been a one-stop shop, quick, efficient, get your benefits for everything. Even if you're claiming it because you can't grow your underarm hair, you could have gone in one place and claimed it. But what did the civil service do? They dragged their feet, they buggered it up, they basically turned it back to what it is now, which is a shambles. They did that, not the government ministers. And what happens is the government ministers issue their instructions, and then that's left to the civil service. Now, sadly, the civil service, where Tony Blair was one of our most intelligent leaders, I don't back him one bit because he went into a war we should never have got involved in. Tony Blair remains one of the most influential political figures and still has a massive stake in our politics. What he did when he was in power, he changed the civil service. He changed the Mandarins and the woke brigade that's in there now, the pro-Blairites, the Ollie Robbins that no one had ever heard of, who was simultaneously doing a Brexit deal that nobody knew about, while our Brexit minister is waving himself goodbye, Dominic Raab on a plane, I'm off to see Barnier. No, you're not. There's somebody already sat talking to him that Theresa May's instigated. Theresa May voted for Remain. Theresa May sent Ollie Robbins, who's a Blairite, a Europhile, and they're talking about Brexit. I mean, come on. So there's so many fingers in the pie of government that people don't understand. They see the minister, the buck stops with him, it's his fault. And I'm not letting them off the hook here. I think the only thing I would say with Truss's cabinet lacking in white men, I think there's one white man that should have been there, and that's Sir John Redwood. He's responded to every single email anybody's ever sent him, even if it's only a quick response and you're not his constituent, even if it's just to tell you he can't respond to you. His knowledge, and he's been around the game of politics such a long time, and he was a real Tory. I don't know what's in the Tory party, but they're not Tories. And for people to still think there's left and right, there's them and us. There's them and it's a mishmash. Everybody complains about the Tory party, but where were the opposition stopping the Tory party? They were non-existent. They asked for more lockdowns. So, and it's all running, and it's like having an oil on canvas of a beautiful scene, and the scene is the country of Great Britain. There it is. It's gorgeous, green and pleasant land. Someone's painted it. And then someone's just got all the colours and run their fingers down and run it all into each other, making a country that is going down the pan. So we haven't got this landscape anymore of left and right, and that's a party for the working man, and that's a party for the rich. No, we've got nothing. We haven't got a party for either of those. Well, we've got a party for the super rich. But what we haven't got is people who represent small businesses, people who represent taxpayers. It's so easy to stand up and cry for benefits, and so easy to stand up and say, we're going to give you more benefits. Who wouldn't want to be the one giving money away? It's, that's a great position to put yourself in. That's holier than thou. But what about people who don't want to just work 16 hours to keep the wage under the benefit claim system? What about people who actually want to put 40 hours in and just provide for their family, who've started a business and took a bank loan out and doubled their mortgage because they just want a slightly better car or 3 holidays a year rather than 1? These people have been abandoned by the political system, and they're the backbone of the country. The economy isn't Nabisco. Your economy isn't Coca-Cola. Your economy is the men and women putting time and effort into small businesses, pubs, restaurants, cleaners. That's your economy, and it's been crushed. and it's been crushed for 2.5 years in every single Western economy.
Yeah.
So
Completely by design as well.
I cannot help but see that's intentional. And furlough was off the shelf. It was ready, prepared. I see it as a precursor to the universal basic income.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
We are. Look at this screen here. Look at Leilani. Look at Jacqui. Look at Yohan. Look at me. Look at you. What are we? All different, and we should be allowed to be different, but be together. And that's what's missing. We're being pushed to be different, but stay separate. So if you're gay and trans, stay over there because that's your camp. And if you're Asian, stay over there because that's your camp. But we're all here on this screen right now, together, working together, talking about the same issues, and yet the environment is teaching us to stay apart. And that's got to stop.
Absolutely. Social distancing was such a bizarre term to me because there's absolutely nothing social about being distant. It's extraordinary.
No.
I just think that story is over-sensationalised and totally misleading because it's only 4 positions she's talking about. And I think the media or anyone drawing attention to this particular story or this subject, they're being racist. You know, what's the issue? It's 4 jobs that happen to have been taken up by 4 people, whether they're black or white or Asian or whatever, is irrelevant. I just think the whole drawing attention to it is actually quite racist. So that's what I've got to say on that. I don't think it'll be deliberate on Liz Truss's part that she's actively thought, oh, I'll have a black one, a blue one, a green one and a yellow one. You know, I think she's just got the people that she thinks are right for the job. And the fact that it's being honed in on and focused on is racist in itself.
But that's what the media does, though. It focuses on that. It would have looked at that there would be people within media that would look and go, let me have a look, and that would be their sole purpose. I remember when England women, the Lionesses, won the European Championship. I think they beat Norway. It was 8-0 or something. And the predictions before the game were they expected England to maybe win, but it could be a draw. So they're expecting a close game. England massacred them 8-0. And it went to the commentator who was on the pitch, and the first thing she said, the first thing after an 8-0 win, was that there wasn't a single non-white player in the game. And I was watching it thinking, that's possibly one of the most racist things I've actually ever heard from the BBC, that's your first thought.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary.
Well, this is a thing as well. What I have a problem with is the use of certain words, like you said, social distancing. Social distancing is not social, but also diversity and what that means. And if it's the most diverse, it excludes white people or white men for it to be the most diverse. So it's just like, take out all of that. Let's not talk about how diverse it is. Just say this is the cabinet. But it's the use of words when they're saying the most diverse cabinet in history when it's got not a single white male in. So that's my problem I have with it. Not really what the cabinet is or what it isn't, but you know, the celebration that it's diverse by not having a white man. That's,
yeah.
You know,
I'm the same. I couldn't care less if there's a white man in it or not. They're all liars, no matter what they are.
Well, the story isn't saying that, though. The story isn't saying Liz Truss has not got any white men in the cabinet. It's not saying that. But I think your average person in the street who reads that story will think she's deliberately banning white men from the cabinet, which is not the case. That's why it's misleading.
But that was one of the headlines I found. It might have been The Guardian where they actually mentioned the fact that it was the most diverse because it included no white men. That was a selling point. It was extraordinary to me to read that, really, because I'm the same as you. Like, we're all, you know, we all come in different shapes and sizes and colours and whatever. Let's just get on with it. And I think most people actually want to get on. I always think that in times of war, when actually I remember being in northern France, I think it was the 50th anniversary of D-Day, and we went to one of the Allied cemeteries, and it was like 22, 21, 23 years old, 21. And then I went to one of the German ones where instead of having white stones, they're black crosses, and it looks sinister, but you look at the ages of the Germans there and it's 21, 22, 23, and you think if they didn't have people above them telling them to hate each other, they'd probably all be down the pub together, you know, having a Weiss beer and getting on like a house on fire. But it's that manipulation, and this is obviously a much smaller level than that, but it's still there. So the final story.
I'd just like to add one
sorry,
thing,
go ahead.
Gareth, if I can. Yeah. So I mean, if you look at this whole situation, I think it makes people stop focusing on the structures that are actually controlling us. So ideally, what we should be thinking about when we think of who's in government is if are they sitting in Bilderberg, or are they sitting in the World Economic Forum, or are they sitting in the Trilateral Commission? But instead of that, the focus goes more towards, okay, is it a male, is it a female? You know, the Obama election was the biggest example of this. So I think most people voted for him because they wanted like this black president, but he's continued the same policies that Bush continued before him. So it's clear to see for anyone who's actually thinking about this that they're trying to distract our attention from the actual control structure and, you know, pin it down to more kind of woke ideology that's misleading all of us.
Absolutely. And then interestingly, in terms of distraction, I think with the fact that the Queen's died and it's literally every news bulletin, it's every page of every paper, I'll be very interested to see either what laws are passed or what motions are put through in the next few days when we're all looking at the Queen and we're not focused on anything else. The media's not reporting anything else. So we were supposed to have 2 more stories, but we are running a little bit short on time. The extra story we're going to drop was the one where a transgender activist has stood outside the human rights offices and just chucked urine all over themselves, which I'm not sure what to comment on that really, other than...
It makes me want to share a toilet.
Well, that's part of it, isn't it? Actually, I did see a lot of comments to that saying, yeah, you're really selling this whole kind of sharing a toilet thing by covering yourself in urine. It's very strange. But the story we are going to talk about then, there's a teacher in Dublin, in Ireland, who's actually been jailed. It started off with him refusing to use. He's a Catholic, so his belief is very important to him. So he refused to use someone's preferred gender pronouns, which ended up with him being suspended. He didn't want to be suspended because he didn't think he'd done anything wrong, and so he turned up at work to teach and was since arrested and jailed as a result of that. We'll go for you, Jacqui. Then, you know, what are your comments on that? Because I mean, where you live on the south coast, you know, it's basically the LGBTQ capital of Europe, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, again, another misleading story in the headline or in the intro or whatever. He says, I refuse to call a boy a girl. Well, that's wrong for a start, because the story was about a boy who wanted to be called they. So that's a bit misleading. It's like the teacher himself didn't quite understand, you know, what he was supposed to do, which is strange because teachers should kind of know about this sort of stuff these days. The other thing about this story is that he's not being jailed for refusing to use the right pronouns. That happened. Then he was suspended, and then he was told that he shouldn't come on the school premises while he's suspended, but he continued to go back into school and try and teach lessons. So then they had to stop him from doing that because he was breaching the court order, and that's what the case is about, him breaching a court order. Obviously it originated with his refusal to use this pronouns because of his Catholic faith, and he just thinks boys are boys and girls are girls and that they shouldn't come into it. But on a personal level, I've got non-binary friends and transgender friends, and it is really difficult for people to get their head around, but most non-binary people understand that. Look at Eddie Izzard, for example. You know, he likes to identify as she now, but actually really says that she doesn't give a toss about if someone gets it wrong. You know, it's not a big deal. And I think some people are like that, which is great, but other non-binary people can be a little bit too strict about it, and it's quite difficult for old friends and family who've known them as one gender to suddenly start calling them they. And it's also confusing for a lot of people because they think they is a plural, you know. That can be explained by saying, no, a they is used. Like if you said to me, oh, I went to my doctor the other day, I would say, well, what did they say? Because I don't know if your doctor's male or female. So that's how people can understand it. But I think, I think if someone wants to be, I'm all into freedom of expression, freedom of speech. Call yourself what you like. Call anyone else what you like. Doesn't matter if it's rude or horrible or mean. You'll just make yourself look like an idiot. But nobody should be told that they can't call themselves something, and they can ask. It's like if you change your name, if I change my name to Julie instead of Jacqui, I would expect my friends to try and use it, but if they got it wrong sometimes, I'd understand. So that's my kind of stance, and I'm not against people being non-binary. I think it's absolutely fine if you want to identify however you want to identify, but just go a bit easier on people who might get it wrong sometimes.
And do you think he should have been suspended for it? Because I know how I was as a kid. If all of this kind of happened when I was at school, if there was a teacher I liked, I would go in and I would change my pronouns every day. And I'd say, like, today you're going to call me this, today you're going to call me that. If I wanted to be an absolute idiot, because I know what I was like. And then I'd say, right, today actually I'm going to identify as a unicorn. Why not? I'm special. So, you know, I think, what do you think about him actually being suspended for not saying they, as opposed to...
Well, they obviously have a policy on it at the school. So I suppose the issue is that he's not going along with the policy. He's standing up for what he believes in, which is good on the one hand, but obviously causing problems for him, the other children and the other teachers. So it's, yeah, I can understand why they might have felt they had to do that. I mean, the judge, I think he's called Judge Quinn in the case, was saying that they really, really don't want to send him to prison. But the fact that he's broken the court order means that he'll probably have to be sent to prison. But he's not being sent to prison for not using the right pronouns. He's being sent to prison for breaching the court order. But whether I think he should have been suspended in the first place or not, if he wasn't, it will then set a precedent for other kinds of rule breaking within the school, I suppose. So I'm not one for rules myself, but schools are, so I can understand why they probably felt they had to do that.
June, is this something that, because I'm looking at this in the sense of, yeah, absolutely, he's you know, potentially facing jail for the court order violation, so that's actually not the same as refusing to use someone's pronouns. But I'm looking at this almost in a similar way to the Jordan Peterson situation, where, you know, it wasn't the fact that Jordan Peterson was refusing to use gender pronouns. It was more a case of I'm not being told by the state what I can and can't say. I'm not being told by the state what my opinion is on this, for fear of being suspended. So June, do you think that this is kind of going a little bit too far now, in the sense that language is being completely taken out of us as individuals? We're told what to say, almost like almost newspeak. This is how you will talk from now on.
Well, I think it seems to be like everything. Unfortunately, trans issues are a great political opportunity for a lot of people. How sincere these opportunities are to the individual getting involved, I'm not really sure. A bit like Jacqui says, really, that the court case is, you know, the issue for him possibly going to jail is a different issue to what made him hit the headlines. And I did pick up on that at the time. It's not something I would cover. Not being anti or pro, I wouldn't cover it, because I think it gets too much airtime. And I think for the size of the population, you know, how many people, you know, where I think schools go wrong, and they've gone wrong since I attended them, because I actually offered my old school to do free lessons on how to run bank accounts and how to set small businesses up, and what would happen if you go overdrawn without informing your bank manager that you'll get charged 25 quid for a letter. And if you'd ignore it, you'll get charged another 25 quid again and an authorised overdrawing fee. You need to know that. You need to know that to stop that, you need to communicate with your bank, and they will listen to you if you've had some sort of delay. I wanted to do that, and they said it wouldn't really fit with their goals and ambitions. I don't really know what they are, because to me, sitting young people down with the hormones buzzing around, and especially any younger, prepubescent kids, getting them to try and choose an identity. The only thing I can correlate that to is I was out in a Chinese restaurant once with my two stepdaughters, and we were there, we just ordered our wonton and one thing and another, and my cute little 6-year-old stepdaughter, her dad said to her in a very dad-type voice, "So, Becky, what do you think you'd like to do when you leave school?" And she had a good look round the restaurant with a fork in the air, and she went, "Well, I've given it a lot of thought, and I think I'd like to be a mermaid." And, you know, she's what, 7?
Great
and
idea.
Her dad said, "A stupid thing to do. You can't be a mermaid. They don't exist." Blah, 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 blah. So she gave it some more thought, and she said, "All right then, I'll be a fish." So she was going to get a dream of living in the sea. So if you get that thinking and tell them that they can be a boy, I mean, she always used to, for some reason, when they played at Katie's Kitchen, she'd dress as a welder. Where did that come from? She'd wear my ski goggles and use some sort of like toy and pretend to be a welder around the radiator. It was just something she'd seen on TV. You know, they're so impressionable. And I think we're losing the art of allowing our kids to be kids. Let them grow up, let them work it out. And then if they make connotations to, I think something's not right here. I don't want to play with dolls, you know, I want to drive a fire truck. Listen to them. Make time for them. Don't make them feel stupid. Don't shut them up. Get parents to make some time for them instead of all this gender business being something that schools. How clinical for a school to handle that. And then you go for pastoral advice. Have you seen pastoral advisors? What they do? They sit there quietly and listen to you and sort of move their heads in an all-knowing way. And okay, we've heard you. We hear what you're saying. And then nothing really happens. I would rather somebody dealt with my gender issues that loved me. Somebody who had some feeling for me. I think they're going to create the best response. And if you haven't got anywhere at home, choose a friend or a friend's mother. Rather than this, again, it's like handing over control of us to the state. Oh, my son might want to be a girl. Please, can the school sort him out? Oh, my daughter wants to have a baby, but she doesn't want a man. Please, can we have some benefits so she'll be independent? She's not independent. She's just swapped a husband for the state. That's the husband. We're teaching. It's all a game. We're teaching people the wrong stuff. We're not teaching them how to grow and survive. We're teaching them how to keep repressed. And all this business of helping them. I'm sorry, there isn't one teacher I could think back of in my school life that I would want to handle an emotional problem. And I would imagine wondering about your gender is a very emotional problem. And then, you know what kids are like, they handle so much more than we give them credit for. As Leilani said, she would have just been contrary. She'd have done the opposite. You know, she'd have just said, right, I'm going to come in and pretend to be a boy, just because she knew she could get away with it. How many kids are doing that? You know, I know a friend from Facebook wrote in and she said her son is driving her mad because he's pretending to be trans because he keeps getting time off school. Because he keeps sending them home to think about things. And she said, you know, the human beings manipulate structure for their own ends. Not everybody, you know, that's how, anyway. Who am I?
Do you think, see, June, I see what you're saying about, like, you know, you're trying to go into school, teach them something practical, and there seems to be this priority about your pronouns and gender and everything within school. Then you've got, like, Halifax Bank telling people to wear their pronouns on their label. Now, to me, if I wanted someone to know something about me, it wouldn't be, my priority wouldn't be pronouns, you know, like this pushes in school. It would be like, you know, activist or animal lover or like horse rider or something interesting about myself. So Yohan, in India, how is it going over there with, you know, pronouns and gender and like, you know, in education as well? Like, you know, what's the kind of priorities?
Yeah, I just like to point out some very important developments that have just recently happened. So, you know, in June of this year itself, a lot of schools in Mumbai actually came out and announced that they were going to be embracing more inclusive, gender-neutral language as well as uniforms. So, I mean, this is the first para of the article. No more welcome, ladies and gentlemen, at the annual day function of Birla Open Mind. So that's an international school that's you know, present very like near me where I live. I'm from Mumbai itself. The school in Walkeshwar and its 138 branches have decided to do away with its traditional greeting at events and replace it with gender neutral alternatives such as dear guests or hello everyone. So I don't think it should be surprising, but since this is a globally coordinated thing, I'm mainly seeing this come out here through more of the left liberal establishment that exists, which mainly kind of you know, lets itself out through these international schools. So these are known as IB schools, and this is where a lot of the kids are indoctrinated with sustainable development propaganda, all these SDGs and all this you know, climate alarmism as well as gender neutrality. It's mainly coming out through the education system, at least as of now, through the elite schools, which is where a lot of rich people, rich Indians send their kids. These trends are also seen in other areas. Like if you see the corporate sector in India, as I mentioned, like a lot of these corporates like TCS and IBM, and there are many others as well, Infosys. They are kind of starting to push this in their own companies, which hire a lot of Indians. I mean, the Indian IT sector is huge and a lot of Indians work for these multinational companies. So through these multinational companies, because their heads are going and sitting in the World Economic Forum and are allied with the UN at various levels, they are pushing this kind of stuff out here. So at least as of now, it's more to do with the leftists out here pushing it culturally, but seeing the trends and the way things are going. I mean, I'll just give you all an example. Recently in my state itself, there was an government authority that issued an order saying that no consent needs to be taken from parents for vaccinating the kids. So we are seeing more and more of a trend go towards like parental ownership of children, towards the state or the schools having more of an influence in what goes into kids. And the programming is the main thing, right? Because these kids are going to be the ones that will grow up in the brave new world, which is why they're putting so much emphasis on at least starting with the kids out here. Because India is a little behind on these issues, as I already discussed. We're a little culturally behind, and we're not as ahead in terms of implementing the SDGs as the countries are, which we're discussing, like Europe and America. So we will definitely take time to catch up, but I'm already seeing these developments happen out here culturally. And with the way things are going, like, we know that they want more state control over children, so it kind of helps to make sense of the overall picture that way.
It feels though as well, if you point stuff out to kids, like I'm talking to a couple of guests we had on Right Now last week, and also Gays Against Groomers a few weeks before, where they were saying like, save the tomboy.
Yeah.
Because I had most of my friends when I was growing up were girls that were tomboys. They were lads basically. We used to play football together, and then they now would be maybe having a counsellor have a word.
See, that's what I think, because I was definitely a tomboy. I was absolutely 100%. I wanted to play with Transformers. I thought Barbies were boring. I wanted to play with Action Man. I wanted to climb trees, get muddy, get dirty, climb gates. I even got my school to start a rugby team, because I thought, oh, rugby's just so cool, like physical and stuff. And I feel like they would have said to me, Leilani, are you sure you're in the wrong body?
Yeah.
And as obviously, I then became a page 3 girl. I'm a girly girl, and I like to not fit in the category, but I'm a woman, a female, and I love it. And if I want to do my hair and makeup, I'll do it. But that's not what, if some guy decides to put on some heels and do his hair and makeup, he suddenly doesn't become, a woman. And me playing, Action Man and Transformers does not make me want to be, make me a little boy either.
No.
So
as a 16-year-old, I mean, I had long blonde hair. I wore nail varnish, eyeliner to school, and all that sort of stuff. It's just how it was. I wanted to be Kurt Cobain, but it would be the same.
You really
probably.
did.
I really did. Yeah, people would probably be in my ear, but there you go.
I had a phone call from one of my followers. It absolutely cracked me up. She was watching. She's older, and I've helped her try and use Facebook. And she just said, June, can you help us with this one, lovey? I'm struggling a bit. There's a fella on here, he's got lovely hair and eyelashes, and he's doing a makeup thing. He's doing a tutorial, how they do with all this makeup, but it was a bloke. She said, now he's done a smashing job, love, he really has done a smashing job. But do they really think this is what being a woman is about? Fannying around with your bloody face all day, making sure you've got it right. She said, it takes him 3 hours to get ready. She said, when I was younger, I'd got up, fed me kids, put them at the bus stop, gone to work, caught the bus, turned up, for work, dressed ready for work. They're giving them the wrong idea of what being a woman is. They need to get down to the bones of it, love. And then she said, when she was sort of, I think about 40 odd, she'd like a growing family, 3 children to bring up. She worked, her husband worked, she had 3 kids. She had a mother that ended up in the early stages of dementia that she had to go and see in her home. These are also responsibilities that adults have, whether you're male or female. And I think we've got this obsession with self, and these, makeup tutorials, and boys are doing them as well now, showing you how they do their makeup, trying to look female, not makeup that men wear. But this obsession, we seem to have, you look at the cabinet, for instance, James Cleverly, Suella Braverman, and I'm not sure about Teresa Coffey, but the other guy, they concentrated on their education when they were at school, and the family concentrated on that. And yet we've got people in Western society, I see it on Facebook, a 26-year-old talking about a facelift. I mean, are we really that obsessed with the physical image that we present? it's never took me longer than 10 minutes to do my makeup right through my entire life, because I usually got up and did it for work, plunked it on and set off for the day. That's it. But we've got this, we've got young people having beauty treatments that film stars used to have. I mean, it's great that we've got access to these things, but don't sit round at the end of the month wondering why you can't afford a house when you've just spent £230 on your eyebrows, you've just spent 150 quid on your hair extensions. Your disposable income is being disposed of far faster than ours could have been in my day, because we didn't have the stuff to spend it on. So, and this is what I mean about values with school. It's all right concentrating on gender issues and this presentation of yourself, but what about preparing people for life when you leave those school gates and you walk out, and that's it? That's when, if you want to be independent, the bills will start coming in, and how you get the money in to pay the bills, and God forbid you should be ambitious enough to want to buy a house. Shouldn't we be creating an institution of education that prepares you for life in general, rather than studying Anne Boleyn? I'm just putting it out there.
No, you're right. I agree. But I think, but then the conspiracy side of me then says, do they want a country or a world of well-educated, well-rounded people, or do they want people to leave university in astronomical debt with a media studies degree that's never going to get them a job anywhere? Therefore is basically indebted to the state and kind of hasn't got a clue what to do. So says, govern me harder, please. It certainly feels like that. Anyway, that's all for this week. A big thanks to Yohan, to Jacqui and to June.
And thanks to you all at home for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Good night.